Alright, 2 million years of Paldean history studied, and there's only a few more hundred years to go. I'm getting close to the end now. This should be a walk in the park. What was that? Wait, no, not this again, please. Why do they always have to do that? Thank God they're not coming back after this generation. Anyway, hi, I'm Dream. It's been a long ride through Paldea's history, but we're finally ready to talk about Heath's expedition into Area Zero and, most importantly, Paradox Pokemon. There really wasn't much activity after the Academy was formed. Heath's expedition is the most notable event we have information about, and for once, the game does not shy away from giving us a big old lore dump about it. In fact, other than a few details about the Scarlet book and the Violet book, much of how Heath's expedition went is pretty clear from the history classes alone. The Area Zero expedition was funded by the Academy, and the team was made up of Paldea's best and brightest. Battlers, researchers, and an author and historian named Heath. Together, they made their way into the deepest parts of Area Zero, and Heath documented everything he found within the book. Though, despite how fascinated everyone was with Area Zero at the time, the book wasn't exactly met with the praise one might have expected. People bought it, but they quickly returned it to used bookstores because of how fantastical the descriptions were. Why did this happen though? And what was so fantastical about Heath's book? Every puzzle has an answer. Let's take this one apart, page by page, to unravel the mysteries of Area Zero. The Great Crater of Paldea details the start of the expedition. The fine weather of Area Zero is something that I feel is not talked about enough. It's kind of just an accepted part of the Great Crater at this point. Area Zero is always covered in clouds, it's always sunny, and night never comes. It doesn't matter what Paldea's weather is like. Area Zero is its own separate thing. It's not natural, right? What if I told you we were given the reason why this happens in the Indigo Disc DLC? The terrarium is a facility of Blueberry Academy with 4 artificial biomes, powered up by the terrarium core at the top. This terrarium core is what stabilizes the terrestrial phenomenon in the Academy, and what regulates the weather and the various ecosystems. If you remember, in the first episode of the series, I explained how the terrestrial phenomenon allows things to mutate, and that is exactly what happens here. Area Zero, just like the terrarium, is an artificial biome powered up by the crystals to recreate a Pokemon paradise. That's why there's always fine weather, and the clouds exist to isolate it from the outside. But explorers and adventurers just have to make their way into it, no? Moving on to the next page, the adventure into Area Zero tells us a little more about this paradise. Notice how, despite the heavenly motif of this area, it is described as being inhospitable to human life. In other words, this is not a place for humans to step in. It's a paradise, yes, but only for nature, for Pokemon. It's explicitly crafted to be hostile to humans, to keep them out. After all, the relationship humans have had with this place has not exactly been the greatest. They go into the Great Crater just to take, and never give. We already talked about the symbol in the next page, so we'll skip over to the Area Zero cartograph. This is the first time the Guardian is mentioned, the thing that causes Area Zero to be the way it is. It's said to protect precious stones and wondrous fruits that sleep in Area Zero's depth. This Guardian is obviously the terrestrial energy that protects Terrapagos as it sleeps, spreading its influence across the different crystals in Area Zero to observe things and acting as it sees fit. Even the Scarlet and Violet books mention how perhaps the strange light itself is the Guardian later on. From now on, I'll refer to this terrestrial energy entity virus light thing by Guardian because it's shorter and doesn't give me a migraine. In the next page, we get a glimpse into the Pokemon that inhabit Area Zero, normal Pokemon that just roam around free from trainers and humans. Some people have argued that this monkey thing here is a new Pokemon, but unfortunately it's just the slacking walking animation. It's nothing too special. It would have been a banger tease though. The real interesting part is the unfamiliar cries they hear from the lower strata. In the next page, we finally get a glimpse into the first of many Paradox Pokemon. It's taken us 4 whole videos to finally talk about them, huh? All we needed was someone to die by getting slam dunked by an overgrown Dunfin. So what are they? Why are they here? What's going on? Before the DLC came out, there was a lot of speculation about them. To give a little bit of context, a lot of the community was split between 2 explanations. Either they were imaginary Pokemon spawned by Terrapagos, or they were actually from the distant past or future. The answer actually lies somewhere in the middle. In the Indigo Disc, it was revealed that they come from different timelines. This concept actually requires me to talk about how the Pokemon Multiverse works, so we're on the same page. So
to answer that, we need to talk about parallel universes.
The idea of there being several worlds has been around for a long time. Despite ORAS being the formal introduction to this multiverse, hints about it have always existed to a lesser degree. Satoshi Tajiri famously wanted to make every copy of the first game personalized, its own world, but Miyamoto was a coward. Also, it was a little unreasonable. So they settled with making two versions. Each of them would be a parallel world. This concept carried on into the future without much importance, but Generation 5 introduced a very interesting twist: GameSync and the Dream World. According to Fennell, GameSync collects save files by using Dream Mist to retrieve Pokemon dreams. This allows that dream to manifest in the Entra link at the center of the region. In other words, Generation 5 says the following: each save file is a different world, and these worlds can connect to each other via the Dream World. This is expanded on in Dream Radar, where the Interdream Zone appears, a place described as a space between dreams and reality investigated by Professor Burnett. In this space, you can find dream clouds that release orbs or Pokemon. Then, ORAS presents the idea that not only does each game have a world for every save file, there's also alternate histories where things happened differently. That is to say, remakes and the original games are both canon, just in different continuities. That's why fans talk about several big timelines: the original timeline, the timeline of generations between 3 and 5, the Mega Timeline, and the really weird Let's Go timeline. Finally, Generation 7 comes out and introduces Ultra Space. Ultra Space is very similar to the Dream World. It's a space that exists between multiple worlds in which things happened differently. For example, Guzzlord is from a world in which Alola was destroyed. Team Rainbow Rocket's members are from different timelines in which the antagonists won. This similarity between Ultra Space and the Dream World is probably why the same exact professor is investigating both of them. To summarize this, the Pokemon Multiverse has an infinite amount of timelines, and each timeline is its own world. We can group them into a Mega Timeline or a Let's Go timeline, but even within these groups there exists an infinite amount of them. Different save files, events that happen differently, so forth and so forth. The Dream World and Ultra Space are akin to a glue that ties the multiverse together. There's also the matter of dimensions like the Distortion World, the Time World, or the Space World, but I'll talk about them in a different video some other day. When you realize timelines are just other worlds, you realize something. Paradox Pokemon are basically a different flavor of Ultra Beasts. Instead of being tied to Necrozma's Light, Paradox Pokemon are tied to Terrestrial Energy. There are a lot of similarities between these two types of Pokemon. They're Pokemon given un-Pokemon-like names, their stats follow certain conventions, all of them share a specific ability, etc. The difference between them comes in how they are pulled into our world. To understand that, we can look at the page about the imagined Pokemon. This will give us the last bit of information we need to solve the puzzle of Paradox Pokemon. Obviously, this Pokemon does not exist. It's a Pokemon drawn by an artist, imagining how other possible Pokemon from Area Zero could look like. But the same can be said for every other Paradox Pokemon. Every future Paradox is described as an object in the Pokédex, not a living being. And a lot of past Paradox Pokemon are described as barely resembling the beasts talked about in expedition logs or having very little in common with them. The imagined Pokemon was not the exception to the rule, it was the norm all along. Remember how we mentioned that the Guardian wanted to protect Area Zero from humans and to keep the place inhospitable to them? What better way to do that than to pull Pokemon from different timelines that resemble things they fear? The difference between the imagination theory and the time travel theory was non-existent. The reason why Paradox Pokemon exist in Area Zero is because the Guardian was pulling them from different timelines based on what the adventurers feared, the legends they had heard, the rumors of beasts that roamed in Area Zero. The pulling mechanism works with memories. Maybe it didn't find an exact reflection to them, but it found something close enough to those fears. You know what other mechanic in this franchise works with memories and wishes? The Dream World and the GameSync. Not only does terrestrial energy make things happen in something akin to a dream, it also surrounds the area with mist when the timeline connection is happening. The clouds over Area Zero are also reminiscent of the clouds in the Interdream Zone. I believe Scarlet and Violet very subtly expanded on the Dream World with this game. The Guardian makes use of it. Ultra Beasts are Pokemon lured into our world by Necrozma's Light. In Paradox Pokemon are Pokemon that were brought into a timeline where they should not exist. So then, what was the point of the time machine? The crystals can already make those timelines connect, right? It all comes down to one thing: stabilization. If you remember, the Area Zero journals talk about how the crystals in the experiments are unstable. We even see this instability in the DLC. Our connection with the professor doesn't last very long. Terrestrial energy can only connect timelines temporarily, not permanently. The Area Zero expedition team found a Paradox Pokemon during their journey into Area Zero, but they clearly weren't there when Sada and Tura's survey team first explored Area Zero, right? That's because the Pokemon hadn't permanently been pulled into the Great Crater, only temporarily, just as it works in the Interdream Zone, where you have a time limit before the Pokemon disappears. What the time machine will allow in the future is to permanently synchronize the timelines. We finally understand what Paradox Pokemon are. There was never an issue with Heath encountering the Pokemon in Area Zero, we simply didn't know that Terastal can only pull things temporarily. With that, there's only two last pages of the book to talk about: the Phantom Memory and the Disc Pokemon. The Phantom Memory mentions how Heath was found unconscious, and when he woke up, he could only recall speaking to someone in an unfamiliar place as if in a dream. What exactly happened to him? We can actually answer that pretty easily now that we've been exposed to the Indigo Disc DLC. At some point during their investigation of the depths, Heath might have taken a different path and encountered To protect him, the Guardian probably caused Terapagos to terrestrialize so that it would appear much more terrifying to Heath. This leads to the Disc Pokemon page, where he describes Terapagos as a strange entity, something that he can't identify as a Pokemon or even as being alive. The overwhelming amount of terrestrial energy causes him to pass out and find himself in an unknown location in a dream. There, he experiences something like what we experience in the Indigo Disc. He finds someone and talks to them, but then wakes up holding a page with his own handwriting. Did that person give him the page? Or did he write it himself during the dream? Just like real life, it's difficult to remember the contents of a dream. It becomes blurry after a bit, and you can't quite remember all the pieces. But the page itself is very interesting. It contains something that looks like formulas, and a graph that is pretty reminiscent of the Terra Orb that will appear in the future. There's even a crown here, possibly referencing the process of terrestrialization. Picture this: Heath is confused and wants to know what the hell the entity he just saw is. So, when he has a dream, the person he encounters explains it to him. That person tells him about Terapagos, about terrestrialization, about the workings of the Terra Orb, and Heath takes notes. But when he wakes up, he doesn't remember any of it. But he doesn't lose all memories of what he was told. I want you to take a careful look at this page. This is the second page from the Disc Pokemon, which didn't make it into the final version of the book. It was kept only in the manuscript that Breyer gives us. Do you spot what's wrong with this? The second half of this page is anachronistic. How could Heath know about Pokemon that shine brightly and crystallize? The terrestrial phenomenon didn't start occurring in Paldea until 60 years later, and yet Heath talks about it as though it's something completely common. This can only mean one thing. Heath talked to someone from the future, and that someone told them about the terrestrial phenomenon. Who could it be? I guess we'll have to find out when we get to their era, won't we? With that, the Area Zero expedition comes to a close. Heath documents their findings and publishes the Scarlet and Violet books, expecting success, but instead, he's met with nothing but criticism by the masses. He talks about this strange, un-Pokemon-like beast that no team has ever encountered. He talks about how a page was revealed to him in a dream. He talks about a strange entity that's possibly not even alive, and they have nothing to show for it. People accuse him of being a liar and a fraud. They return the books to the bookstores they bought them from, and Heath loses any reputation he may have had in the past. His memories, too, are uncertain and conflict with the reality he finds himself in. Heath finds himself stuck between a dream and reality. Only a professor from nearly 2 centuries later will take his book seriously and attempt to find the beasts that captured their imagination. The ending is drawing near, eh? There's only 2 more videos left, one about Kitakami and one about the professor's research. They might be a little on the shorter side, but that doesn't make them any less important. That will be all for today. I hope you enjoyed it. And remember, keep dreaming.